You are listening to the Law Enforcement Pirate Radio Network. Radio Free Larry presiding.
You can run, but you can't hide.
Radio Free Larry.
All right, here we go again. I have to plug in one of my lights here because it's run out of its power that it has in the battery. So now I plug it in with a USB cord and it lights up and charges at the same time. It lights up and charges at the same time. USB. So, how do I know that Bob Levinson investigated too much? How do I know that Robin Gritz investigated too much? How do I know that John Luna and his friend in the FBI investigated too much? Because unfortunately, I, Lawrence Moore, investigated too much. This is the world we live in. It's what the deep state says is nirvana. It's what they want to make you think is a higher calling. So God had been laying out my life a certain way to prepare me for the day the CIA would come along and psychologically operate me and attempt to assassinate me, to include using surreptitious drugging. If I would have ate that whole plate at the Wharf Rat, I'd be dead today. Somebody would have had to shoot me, or at least they would have said that to stop me. If I'd have ate that whole lunch that I told you about where I was surreptitiously drugged when I went to lunch with the two quote-unquote contractors where they picked the lunch spot, where everybody was stationed with pistolas as I returned from lunch to take me out if, in fact, the drugging would take, I would be dead. I wouldn't be alive. And I'll tell you something else. They were frustrated because they put so much surreptitious drug in what I was eating that it almost instantly affected me. I mean, almost instantly. There was no way that I couldn't notice that. But what they do is they put you under their control. And they believe that you would be too reserved and afraid to not finish your meal. There was a lot of miscalculations in how they handled the CIA operation to execute, assassinate, surreptitiously drug, sexualize, radicalize, separatize, try to make me a separatist in some of this. All of the above and then some. There were missteps that God caused. And I'll tell you, people have been taken out of the way and executed by God so that it couldn't get where they needed it to go. Because remember, we have a ton of criminals that are working with the CIA, not by requirement. That's where the FBI and the CIA is playing you all. Yes, by the need of investigation, they're going to rub elbows with some seedy people. But what they're doing is they're taking those seedy people and putting them into lives where there are no seedy people. And that's part of the attempt to psychologically change the person. They'll isolate everyone else out of that person's life, or isolate that person away from everyone else by taking them out of that person's life. It's not just character assassination. Their goal is murder. Their goal is death. If they can discredit the person through that death, then that's what they want. Nazi Mengele. Dr. Nazi Mengele is who all of them are, irregardless of how far gone they are. Because we're not going to take the one that's the worst and say that's all there is. Because you're all part of it. You're all Nazis. You're all communists, regardless of who you vote for. So again, they would bring people in to their closed society, their criminal enterprise, their spy ring within the government that was designed to destroy the government from within by taking it over with Nazi and communist techniques to include KGB, Chinese secret police, CIA, etc. They destroyed the government of the United States, but yet self-enriching, group enriching themselves, and would bring individuals in as they believed that they were the same cookie-cutter Nazi Mengele personality. You can give the charity all day, Bezos. You're part of the deep state. You murder people. You cause people to commit crimes. You are who you are. That's how it works. Although it could be people within Amazon, and Bezos is simply not as responsible as somebody in that corporation should be if they're the CEO, to ensure that CIA is not using their platform to psychologically destroy U.S. citizens. I've tested each and every one of you, to include Amazon. I've done things to find out where that information goes and if, in fact, it was fed into the psychological murder machine. The deep state knows that I did this to them beginning in the 90s and knows I was laughing at them. And that's when they began drugging me. Or not when they began drugging me, when they decided to assassinate me instead of merely discredit me. So the drug changed. And then what happens is when I start flipping the triggers around the baited information that I provide them, they all become extremely paranoid. And that's when it goes crazy all around me. Because that proves that they're involved past my simple case. It proves that they're part of the murders. It proves that they're part of the hostile takeover of the United States by criminal enterprise for personal and group gain, while writing off the rest of the nation and addicting them to narcotics so they'd be too drugged out to muster a defense. One day your enclaves won't protect you, whether it's here on Earth in a revolution and a civil unrest that goes with it, or whether it's when you pass from this planet to hell. You'll go to hell. God will smite you dead in hell over and over and over again for what you all are doing. There is no ignorance. I've been speaking for quite some time now. If you don't hear me online or read my stuff online, you hear me and get the inference in your mind. I know that for a fact. God ensured that people that heard me in certain names would produce videos about the interaction. And one thing's for sure, I've never claimed myself anything than a servant of the Most High God in any name. And I tell everyone to love God and love your neighbor. But there comes a time when we have to protect those that are less capable. What you should realize about people that are addicted to narcotics is that they are less capable, less fortunate than you are if you are not addicted to narcotics. What they did to my ex-wife is one of the most saddest things I've ever seen in the history of the deep state, although I'm sure it was repeated over and over and over again by CIA, Kroll, the Stanley Arkin Group, Fusion GPS, NSA, selected federal agents that were part of the coup, beginning in the 90s at a minimum. The coup didn't start against President Trump. President Trump's only an individual that was put in to reverse the coup. The coup is against the United States of America. And you all would be smart to identify that. That this coup is not against the president alone. The president is only one part of the coup. The coup is already in place. That's why they're so bold. That's why they're so open about it, because they've been doing it for 20 or 30 years. And they wanted to get rid of the people that investigated too much. So they selected people in the Marshal Service, in the FBI, in the IRS, in your state police, in your local police to become the heroes, the Amazons of your given entity. The people that you had to worship, like Mueller, Comey, George Tenet, Woolsey. They overthrew the Constitution and the constitutional government of the United States decades ago. You put President Trump in to reverse the coup. The President of the United States is not the leader, the Constitution is. He is a leader, but the coup is not solely against the president. The coup is against the Constitution and the constitutional government of the United States, so that a Politburo type of organization, career employees, would tell the entire United States, unelected people, would tell the United States who anybody gets to be, has to be, or won't be. They are restricting the buying and selling at the level that they can. If they were to become more powerful, they would increase that restriction. If they were to become more powerful, they would increase that restriction. They are the beast. They are criminal enterprise. They are Nazi Mengele. They are Stalin at Stalin's worst. The power that they believe they have is given to them by Satan. Stalin only dreamed of a psychological machine that could do what the CIA, the federal employees, the state employees, the local employees, in cahoots with foreign governments and private sector corporations are doing. Stalin could only dream of such anti-power, such heinousness, such Nazi Mengel ability, such satanic projection of anti-power. They could only dream of it. They were nobodies. I mean, face it, Brennan's big. Comey's big. Mueller's big. Schiff is big. Pelosi's big. But what are they? They're satanic. And they belong in hell. But I'm not telling you to be violent. They've murdered people over the decades. That's how they stay in their offices, or at least they believe. This is the next topic. The underlings are always lying to the leaders. So what does that mean? Okay, if you're a millionaire or a billionaire and you're funding the deep state, you pick the trashiest, shittiest people in the government to use, and they used you back. None of this was necessary. They're creating emergencies for you to kick some cash loose to pay them. You've all been had your entire life. You could have had a beautiful life. You could have had a real life in the real United States of America. But instead, you bought into what Satan peddled in your mind, and you bought yourself government employees that are the most heinous, the most treacherous, and the biggest liars in the history of this world. And they cost you everything, including your credibility and your salvation. You're all going to hell. Face it, you can't get out of hell for what you've all done to people. And if you don't believe in God, you're going to believe in something when you wake up in the most hellish hell that has ever existed. Again, don't be violent. The things I say could cause somebody to become excited. So I want you to stay calm. Love God, love your neighbor, take care of your neighbor, and believe that they all deceived one another. They all have deluded one another and will not see God before they're thrown into hell. They will not stand before God. There are people here on this planet that will stand before God and then be moved to a hell. In the Bible, it speaks of outer darkness. They're past outer darkness. They're past outer darkness. They're in a hell that the Bible doesn't even speak of. Now, if God can find a way to get them out of that hell, then that's fine. By what judgment they have judged will be judged again against them. And that's where hell comes from. I've spoken about that for 15 years now. And that's not merely saying things, because they'll walk around all day saying, oh, I love everyone. Hippy dippy doo. But in reality, they are the most satanic Dr. Mengels of the mind and secret organizations that have ever existed. God knows that God cannot provide a fix for this planet. No matter how much power or how many power movements that God and I have moved over the last 15 years, and actually longer than that, because I was moving it asleep also. It will not change the satanic beings from giving in to the satanic urges to cause sin, to cause people to fall, to be those stumbling blocks physically, psychologically, and spiritually. They are using psychological warfare to cause people to fall, and they always have some excuse that it's politics or that person this or that person that. So again, to go back to the idea that they recruited a bunch of people in the government based upon certain mindset. And then when they thought they were ready, they would increase that psychology of torture that would cause them to feel good about harming another. Now, remember, when you look at that, you'll see, well, he must be talking about people that torture terrorists. Well, I've spoken on that. The exigent circumstances during 9/11 are what I look at, and I said we should not have had to torture people. We should have been on the ball enough, forward of all of it, so that we wouldn't have to engage in torture. And I understand there are times when people will do what they need to do to get information, but those times within our nation should be few and far between, if never. We are that technologically advanced, and that technology is not only electronic. We have human intelligence. I can see what they can do to our nation. I mean, it works real well, doesn't it? I mean, look what they're doing to the president with that technology. Yet they can't seem to get forward of having to torture people. Well, that's because their focus is in the wrong direction, because their focus is demonic, even if it's in the right direction. No, I'm speaking about the torture of U.S. citizens. You look at a person that loses their mind. You look at a person that runs down the street without clothes on. You look at a cop that can't focus enough to pull his service firearm out and protect himself fast enough. That type of thing is occurring based upon psychological warfare and psychological torture techniques of people in government and the private sector that are considered not deep state material, or somebody that's in the way of a deep state person. I believe Jonathan Luna and the FBI person that he was with investigated somebody that had connections in the CIA. We know, a separate case. We know with these pedophile cases, we know that it appears that they are having a difficulty investigating those cases. And they will try to discredit anybody that is investigating those cases if it touches on a deep state person. And I say deep state, I already told you Google is deep state. So I'm not merely speaking about government employees. Now, you may have a cop in there, a police officer, say in a place I've never been. So they won't think I'm speaking about anybody specific. Although sometimes I would say that just to make you think that. Where have I never been? I don't think I've been in Sheboygan. So you have a cop in Sheboygan, and that cop is a sexual crime investigator. But that cop's part of the deep state. That person is responsible for Epstein existing in the form that he existed in. Epstein somehow was connected to the deep state, and he caused people to be compromised so they could be operated by the deep state, CIA, and others. That's where all that goes. The donor part, well, how did he get all his money? He defrauded people. Why didn't he go to jail for that? I mean, if you haven't figured it out, Epstein is deep state. And of course, they're saying, thank God for the deep state. Epstein is deep state. Those that are around him that haven't been prosecuted are deep state. And they're saying, thank God for the deep state. I told you it's all a lie, bigger than the lie you thought it was. Because they're actually using extreme, strong, psychological warfare methods to include surreptitious drugging to attempt to cause people to offend while letting the real offenders go and have marvelous millionaire lives. Epstein is probably somebody that would not have been as big if the CIA hadn't selected him to be that big. When I say CIA, that includes all of the deep state. Foreign nations, foreign spies, private sector corporations that spy, such as Stanley Arkin Group, Fusion GPS. That's how Epstein stayed out of jail, out of prison. The deep state operated a bunch of people, and they were on call to look the other way or screw up Epstein's case. But Epstein's not the only one. And when you think of a government such as that, you think of a government that may have caused Epstein to be a pedophile. There's always that part of it that is today undiscoverable. Although maybe in NSA, those electronic records might exist. Which means they may have started that in Epstein's life just so they could use him and control him and cause him to pass that on to other people that they could control and use. So I believe that Jonathan Luna and the FBI agent friend was investigating some crime, not necessarily a sexual crime. However, that crime touched on deep state shadow government criminal enterprise territory. And they came in to own the entire community, and people thought it was about other things that it wasn't about. Although in the middle of that, I began investigating what I believed was individuals that were attempting to do something of a criminal nature in my life and in the life of others around me. Many failed, many didn't do anything, and I don't know if they failed because I couldn't get to the point of going to the Inspector General of the Justice Department. I thought about it, I was close to it, and then I stopped. Besides, it didn't seem that anybody in the Justice Department was real any longer. It was that bad at that point. And I was heavily drugged at that point. Most likely LSD. Well, praise God in all that you do. Praise God.
You are listening to the Law Enforcement Pirate Radio Network. Radio Free Larry Brazil.
You can run, but you can't hide.